I didn't plan to walk into the bistro alone that night, but the reservation had my name on it, and the date was carved into my heart. 12 years, married, a dozen candles we once promised to keep lit. The host's smile faltered when I said Matthew's party of two, and somewhere near the back, I heard the bright pop of a cork, the soft cheer of strangers who didn't know me. A pale bouquet sat on a linen-draped table identical to ours, and beside it, 2 flutes caught the light like a dare. Perfume hung in the air, too floral for me, too confident to belong to happenstance. I saw Nathan's profile first, his laugh I knew well, then the tilt of a woman leaning in, as if she'd always been there. Something in me steadied, instead of shattering the way a picture frame sits level after years of being crooked. I exhaled once, and the room sharpened like glass. Before I go further, tell me where you're listening from in the comments, and tap like and subscribe if stories about truth and justice speak to you. This one begins with a dinner reservation and ends with a life reclaimed. My name is Claire, and I grew up in a house where we ironed the tablecloth for Sunday lunch, and my dad fixed what was broken before anyone asked. My mother kept a coffee can for emergencies and a second one for dreams. And somewhere between those 2 jars, I learned the math of marriage: you give when you can, you hold steady when storms roll in. By 24, I had my real estate license and a starter condo with more hope than furniture. And then I met Nathan. Easy smile, calloused hands, a promise of a small business that just needed a little runway. I understood ambition the way it chews at a person from the inside, and I believed I could be the bridge that got us there. When my grandmother left me a modest inheritance, I didn't think twice about what love required. We married in a modest church with white lilies and vows we meant. And for a while, it was simple. I showed houses by day. He learned how to juggle bids and subcontractors. And at night, we drew floor plans on napkins and called them the future. When the market hiccuped, I covered the mortgage and the equipment leases because I could. Because partnership is not a scoreboard. The year Sophie was born, a promotion dangled itself in front of me. Bigger territory city clients, late nights at an office with a view, and I turned it down without announcing the sacrifice, telling myself that steadiness was its own view. We moved from a starter home to a yellow 2-story on a quiet street where neighbors waved from driveways and kids chalked the sidewalks after dinner. From the outside, we looked like we'd found the recipe. There were hairline fractures you only see once something finally breaks. Late bids that ran long dinners eaten cold because he couldn't get away receipts that didn't match the job sites on his calendar. He always had a reason to set my worry down, like it was something I'd simply imagined picking up. We waved at the same church families on Sundays and hosted barbecues in the backyard, and the laughter at our table sounded like proof. Sophie learned to ride her bike on the cul-de-sac, and I taught her to steer into the wobble, and sometimes I wondered if I'd learned that same trick myself. It's amazing what you can convince your heart to believe when the walls of your life look freshly painted. My parents called our home the house that love built, and I let them. It felt kinder than the house Claire financed, which is what those careful spreadsheets in my desk would have said. I kept my name on every important document because that's what my mother taught me, and I kept my eyes on Nathan's wins because that's what marriage taught both of us to perform. He liked to say, "We're a team," and I liked the way the word "we" sounded when he meant it. When he landed a commercial build, we celebrated with takeout and a movie on the floor because the couch was still on back order. And I can still remember the way Sophie fell asleep across both our laps, the 3 of us, a braid of limbs and quiet breath. Those are the photographs I kept in my mind when little things didn't add up. A week before our anniversary, Sophie mentioned casually that she'd seen Daddy at the park with Aunt Brooke, a name we hadn't taught her, and a person I hadn't met. She held his hand, my daughter said, not unkindly, like she was reporting the weather. I told myself business contacts sometimes meet at parks, that some people are friendly huggers, that 9-year-olds misinterpret what they see. That night, I wiped down the counters twice and couldn't shake the scent of a perfume I didn't own from Nathan's jacket, a sweetness that made my teeth ache. The next morning, I booked the dinner anyway, typed my name into the reservation line like a promise to myself, and set a red reminder on my phone so I wouldn't forget who I intended to be when the day came. I didn't plan to test anything. I planned to celebrate. On the afternoon of our anniversary, Nathan texted that something came up, a phrase with a shrug baked into it, and said we'd do it right next week. The words slid off my screen like oil, leaving a film of doubt I could finally see. I changed into the black dress I always felt like myself in, looked in the mirror long enough to remember my own face, and drove to the bistro with both hands on the wheel, telling myself that if everything was fine, I'd be the first to exhale. The host asked if I wanted to wait at the bar, and I told him I'd find my party. The room was warm, lively, unbothered by my private storm, and somewhere near the back, 2 glasses chimed like a bell calling me forward. I took 3 steps, then 4, and when Nathan finally looked up, his smile vanished so fast, it left a hollow behind it. "Nate," I said, letting the name carry across the linen and the roses, and the woman beside him set her hand flat on the table, the way you steady things that are about to fall. The moment Nathan's eyes met mine across that table, the noise of the restaurant seemed to fade. The clinking glasses, the hum of conversation, the music drifting from the bar, all of it fell away, as though the entire room had tilted toward us. His face drained of color, and his hand, which had rested easily on the stem of a champagne flute, slipped against the glass with a sharp tap. Brooke's hand froze on the tablecloth, her smile curdling into something tight and nervous, as if she had just realized the joke had been on her all along. I didn't rush forward or make a scene immediately. I walked each step, measured the heels of my shoes, marking time against the hardwood. When I reached the table, I didn't bother lowering my voice. "Nathan," I said, letting his name carry across the distance between us. "You canceled our anniversary dinner. 12 years gone with a single excuse." His mouth opened, but whatever he intended to say, drowned in the silence that spread across the room. People at nearby tables had already turned eyes, flicking between us, the kind of attention that sharpens like a knife. I gestured toward the roses, the champagne, the reservation we had once discussed for weeks. "You didn't cancel anything. You just replaced me." Brooke shifted in her chair, tugging at the edge of her sleeve as if covering bare skin might make her invisible. She glanced at Nathan, hoping he would smooth the edges, but even he seemed caught in a trap of his own making. "Claire, please," he started, his voice low. "This isn't what it looks like." The words sounded hollow, rehearsed, as though he had used them before on other nights I never saw. I leaned across the table, close enough that he could see the steadiness in my eyes, and said, "Do you know how pathetic this looks? Bringing another woman to the table meant for your wife drinking champagne. I was supposed to share with you. You've humiliated yourself more than you could ever humiliate me." A ripple of gasps traveled outward as if the entire restaurant inhaled at once. Phones appeared in hand screens, glowing, capturing every second. Nathan stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor, hands lifted like a man trying to calm an accident scene. "You're making a scene, Claire?" he muttered through clenched teeth. I straightened my back, feeling a steel thread run down my spine. "No, Nathan. You made the scene. I'm just finally seeing it." His hand reached for mine, a gesture he must have thought would soften me. But I pulled back so sharply he stumbled. "Don't touch me," I hissed low enough that only the first few tables heard. My words were clear, final, unshakable. The weight of them lingered in the stillness, and when his hand dropped to his side, something inside me shifted. For years, I had bent myself around his excuses, his late nights, his explanations. In that instant, I felt the bend snap back into place. I turned toward Brooke, who had gone pale, her hand trembling as it clutched her glass. "Congratulations," I said evenly, though my voice carried just enough for the onlookers to catch. Enjoy the scraps of a man who doesn't value loyalty. Her eyes darted downward, shame coloring her cheeks, and she looked as though she wanted the floor to swallow her whole. Without another word, I plucked the roses from the center of the table, their stems slick against my palm, and let them fall to the ground. The petals scattered at Nathan's feet, and then I walked away, my head high, the air crisp against my cheeks as I pushed through the door. Outside, I stood still for a moment, the night breeze pressing cool against the heat in my face. My hands were shaking, though not from fear, but from a surge of something that felt startlingly close to freedom. I walked slowly down the sidewalk, each step heavy but firm, the stares of strangers following me through the glass. For 12 years, I had played the role of the steady wife, the supporter, the one who smoothed every rough edge. That night, as I stepped away from the restaurant, I felt something close within me, and something else crack open. Back home, the silence of the house was deafening. The hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the wall clock, even Sophie's framed school photos on the mantel seemed to press in on me. I sat in the living room with only the dim lamp lit and stared at the wall, the sound of that slap, sharp and final, still ringing in my ears. My mind ran through every sacrifice, every compromise, every excuse I had swallowed whole. My grandmother's inheritance had been poured into Nathan's business, into our home, into bills he had promised to cover next time. I had turned down promotions, stepped back from opportunities, all under the banner of family. Sitting in the dark, I realized I had been the scaffolding holding up a structure he had no right to claim as his own. The warning signs had been there. Receipts shoved into pockets from places he had no reason to be. Shirts that carried traces of perfume I didn't wear, late-night calls that went unanswered. Each time, I chose to believe the easy explanations. Meetings ran long, suppliers insisted on another round, waitresses wore heavy scents. I told myself that trusting your husband meant pushing doubt aside. Tonight proved otherwise. What haunted me most wasn't just the betrayal at that table, but the way Sophie's voice echoed in my memory. A week earlier, she had mentioned Aunt Brooke at the park holding her daddy's hand. Her words were innocent, but her eyes had been searching mine, waiting for me to confirm or deny something she already sensed. I had brushed it off, unwilling to burden her with suspicions I couldn't face myself. Now I saw clearly my daughter had noticed truths I had been too afraid to name. I walked upstairs and opened her bedroom door. She was asleep, her chest rising gently, her favorite stuffed rabbit tucked beneath her chin. I stood there longer than I should have, listening to the steady rhythm of her breath, knowing that every decision I made from here on had to be for her. She deserved a mother who didn't look away from what was obvious, a home built on honesty instead of illusions. When I finally lay down in my own bed, the sheets felt foreign, the space beside me too wide. But beneath the ache and the rawness, a new certainty took root. If Nathan thought I would remain the silent partner in his life while he traded loyalty for attention, he was wrong. He might have tried to replace me at that table, but he would not erase me. The humiliation he intended for me would be the weight he carried instead. As I stared into the darkness, my breathing steadied. The truth was no longer something to fear. It was the weapon I had been too timid to wield. I promised myself that night I would never again let him write the story of our life without my consent. He had chosen betrayal. I would choose justice. And justice, I knew, would not come quietly. The morning after that night at the bistro, I woke with swollen eyes and a headache that made the sunlight feel sharper than usual. The pillowcase was still damp from tears I must have cried in my sleep, and for a moment I thought I might simply lie there and let the day pass without me. But the clock on the dresser ticked forward, and I remembered that Sophie would wake soon. I couldn't let her see me shattered. I pulled myself upright, splashed cold water on my face, and stared at the woman in the mirror. My reflection looked hollow, but beneath the puffiness and fatigue, there was something else, an ember I hadn't noticed in years. Downstairs, the house was quiet, though it seemed to hum with the weight of what had been revealed. I poured coffee into my favorite mug and held it with both hands, the warmth steadying me as my thoughts circled. Every inch of this home carried my fingerprints, the mortgage payments. I covered the furniture, bought with my grandmother's inheritance, the paint colors I had chosen after hours of searching through swatches. For years, I believed I was building something with Nathan, but now I saw the truth. I had been the builder all along, and he had been standing on a foundation I created. That realization stung, but it also lit something inside me. I thought back over the years, remembering how easily he had persuaded me to let opportunities pass by. When Sophie was born, I turned down a promotion that would have taken us to San Francisco. Nathan said Sacramento was where his business could thrive, that uprooting wasn't worth it. I agreed, telling myself family mattered more than ambition, that love meant sacrifice. I did not see how each sacrifice chipped away at who I was. Little by little, I stopped making choices for myself. I made choices for us, except the us turned out to be a mirage I carried alone. There had been signs. Nights when Nathan came home smelling faintly of perfume, his shirt collar creased like he had been touched. Receipts from bars and restaurants I had never visited crumpled and shoved into his pockets. Each time I asked, he dismissed my concerns with a quick smile and smooth excuses. He was meeting clients, dining with suppliers, brushing off waitresses who wore too much fragrance. I wanted to believe him because the alternative was unthinkable. Believing he lied meant admitting I had poured my life into a hollow frame. So I chose to silence my doubts and let his explanations cover my unease. Sophie, though, had seen more than I wanted to admit. Just a week earlier, she told me she had spotted her father at the park with Aunt Brooke. She said it casually, her small voice light, but her eyes searched my face as if she knew the truth needed confirming. She held his hand, Sophie added like it was nothing unusual. I brushed it aside at the time, telling myself she was mistaken. But children notice things adults work hard to ignore. She had already sensed what I refused to face. That thought pierced me deeper than anything Nathan had done, because now my daughter's trust was on the line. The hours after the anniversary dinner passed in a haze. Messages from Nathan lit up my phone first, pleading, then defensive, finally angry. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I boxed up fragments of my life, not to leave, not yet, but to remind myself I could. Important documents, photographs. A few keepsakes went into a single cardboard box. I set it by the front door like a quiet declaration. If I chose to walk away, I could. The house might echo without me, but I would not echo without it. When Sophie came home from school that day, she noticed the box. "Are we moving, Mom?" she asked, her voice hesitant. I knelt down to meet her eyes, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Not right now," I told her softly, "but we're going to make sure this house always feels safe for us." She nodded, but I could see the question still lingering behind her gaze. Children know when something is wrong, even if they can't name it. I hugged her tightly, promising myself that whatever came next, she would not carry the burden of Nathan's choices. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table with a pad of paper, writing down every instance I could recall of Nathan's lies. Dates, places, little inconsistencies I had brushed aside. The list grew longer than I wanted to admit. The paper blurred at times from the tears that came uninvited, but I kept going because the act of writing gave me something to hold on to. It was proof, not just for anyone else, but for myself, that I had not imagined the cracks. They had been there all along. The phone buzzed again, Nathan's name glowing across the screen. This time, I let the voicemail play. His voice was tight controlled at first. "Claire, we need to talk. You overreacted. Let's sit down, just the two of us." The message shifted his tone sharper. "Don't do anything stupid. You don't have the right to touch our money. I deleted it without saving." His words no longer reached me. They floated like echoes in an empty room. For the first time, I realized the power he held was only what I had allowed him to carry. As night settled over the neighborhood, I tucked Sophie into bed. She clutched her stuffed rabbit close, asking no questions, only watching me with quiet eyes. I kissed her forehead and promised we would be fine. When the house grew still again, I sat alone in the dark hands folded in my lap and listened to the silence. It no longer felt suffocating. It felt like a pause before something important, a breath before a long exhale. I didn't know yet what steps I would take or how far this would go. But I knew one thing with certainty: I could not return to the way things were. The blind trust, the silent compromises, the sacrifices made without acknowledgement, they were finished. Nathan had betrayed more than vows. He had betrayed the life I built, the daughter we were raising, and the person I once was. The grief was heavy, but underneath it stirred a determination I hadn't felt in years. That night, as I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, I told myself a truth I had avoided for too long. I was not powerless. I was not trapped. I had more strength than he ever imagined, and I would use it. Quietly, carefully, piece by piece, I would begin to take back what was mine. By the next morning, something inside me had shifted. The grief still lingered like a bruise, but beneath it ran a current of clarity I hadn't felt in years. The shock of betrayal had hollowed me out, yet in that hollow space there was room for something new: resolve. I sat in the kitchen with my coffee cooling beside me and made myself a promise. I would not wait for Nathan to decide my fate. I would act. Quietly, at first, but firmly. My first call was to the bank. The woman on the line had the kind of voice that sounded cheerful, even when she was just verifying account numbers. "I'd like to freeze our joint accounts," I told her. And though my hands shook, my words did not. She asked if there had been suspicious activity, and I said yes, though not in the way she imagined. Within minutes, the access was gone. Nathan would swipe his card and discover that his endless dinners, his easy charm, no longer came at my expense. The thought steadied me. I moved quickly. From the joint investment account, I shifted what remained of my grandmother's inheritance into my personal checking. That money had been the cornerstone of everything Nathan claimed as his achievement: the house, the seed for his company, the cushion during lean years. I was not about to let it fund another bouquet of roses for Brooke. By midday, I sat cross-legged on the living room rug with a stack of boxes open around me. I packed deliberately only what Sophie and I might need if we had to leave quickly. Clothes, important documents, the photographs I couldn't replace. I moved almost mechanically, as though stopping to think too long would undo me. In Nathan's desk, I found a folder of receipts and tucked beneath it a keycard from a hotel I'd never heard him mention. My hands trembled as I slid them into an envelope, labeling it proof with a pen that nearly ran dry. I knew he would try to twist the story to make me seem unreasonable. This time, I would have the facts. By late afternoon, the phone began to buzz in earnest. First came texts: "Claire, let's talk." "You overreacted." Then calls. By the fifth one, the tone had turned sharp. "You don't have the right to touch our money." I set the phone face down on the counter and let it vibrate until it fell silent. For once, he could stew in the uncertainty. For once, I held the strings. That evening, Julia stopped by. She had been my friend since college, the kind of person who could read me with a single glance. She took one look at the boxes by the door and said softly, "It's finally happened, hasn't it?" I nodded, unable to find words, and she sat beside me on the couch, her hand resting lightly on mine. "Then let him face the storm he created," she said. "You don't have to carry it anymore." Her calm steadied me, and for the first time since that night at the restaurant, I felt a flicker of relief. When Sophie came home from school, she stopped short in the entryway, her backpack still slung over her shoulder. "Why are there boxes here?" she asked. I knelt down, brushing a wisp of hair from her forehead. "We might spend a little time at Grandma's," I told her, choosing words carefully, "just to make sure everything feels safe." She studied me for a long moment before nodding slowly. Kids know more than they ever say out loud. That night, as I tucked her into bed, my phone lit up again. This time, I answered. Nathan's voice came fast, sharp. "Claire, what the hell is going on?" "My card got declined at lunch. Did you—" "Yes," I said, cutting him off. My tone was steady, though my heart pounded. "You sat at a table with another woman on our anniversary. That was your choice. This is mine." For a long moment, all I heard was his breath, ragged and uneven. "We can fix this," he tried. "It doesn't have to be." "It already is," I replied and hung up. When the line went dead, I stared at the phone in my hand, the silence heavy. But instead of despair, a new sensation took its place. Power. Not the loud kind Nathan always sought, but a quiet, undeniable strength. For the first time in years, I felt awake. The days that followed blurred together with tasks I once would have avoided. I spoke to a lawyer, a woman named Claire Donovan, known in Sacramento for dismantling cheating husbands without hesitation. Her assistant scheduled me for a consultation by week's end, her brisk voice promising, "We'll take care of you." Just hearing those words gave me courage. I reached out to a realtor friend to ask about the market, dropping hints I might need to sell. She didn't press, only said, "When you're ready, we'll move quickly." Meanwhile, Nathan's messages piled up. One moment pleading, the next, threatening. "You're ruining me. Claire, if I go down, you go down too." I ignored them all, though each one reminded me why I couldn't turn back. The dominoes were already falling. By the third day, word had started to spread. Julia called to tell me that people downtown were already talking that someone had posted a clip from the bistro. "It's everywhere, Claire," she said gently. "But you should know everyone's on your side." I sat at the kitchen table stunned, letting her words settle. For so long, I had feared the whispers, the pity. Yet here they were, voices of support, friends reaching out with messages that read, "Good for you. Don't let him spin this." Even Nathan's family didn't shield him. His mother phoned one evening, her voice low and heavy. "I don't know what to say," she admitted. "I didn't raise him to be like this." There was shame in her tone, but also something else, a quiet solidarity. Before we hung up, she added, "If you need help with Sophie, you can count on me." The words softened something tight in my chest. At night, when the house was quiet, I lay awake thinking of Sophie's face, the way she had asked about the boxes. I knew this fight wasn't just about me. It was about her future, about showing her that betrayal had consequences, that silence was no longer an option. I would not let her believe that love meant accepting lies. By the end of that week, the shape of my plan was clear. I would strip away the power Nathan thought he had, not with shouting or vengeance, but with steps so deliberate he couldn't stop them. Bank accounts, legal filings, truth spoken aloud. each move a brick in the wall I was building between his chaos and my daughter's life. I could see now that the woman who walked into that restaurant expecting an anniversary celebration was gone. In her place stood someone different, someone who would no longer shrink to keep the peace. And as I looked ahead to the next family gathering, where Nathan would no doubt try to reclaim his dignity, I knew I was ready. This time, I wouldn't be the one caught off guard. The invitation came as a surprise. A family dinner at Nathan's parents' house, with everyone gathered around the long oak table, as though nothing had shattered. My first instinct was to refuse to protect myself from the performance Nathan would try to stage. But as I thought about it, I realized this wasn't about him. It was about reclaiming space, about refusing to let him control the narrative. If he wanted to play the role of the respectable son, I would bring the truth to the table he trusted most, his family. When Sophie and I arrived, the house was alive with chatter and the smell of roast chicken drifting from the kitchen. Elaine met us at the door with a warm hug, her voice soft as she whispered, "I'm glad you came." I felt Sophie's small hand tighten around mine, her eyes scanning the room filled with familiar faces. Robert sat at the head of the table. Daniel and Megan were already seated, and Nathan stood near the far end, his shirt pressed crisp, his smile brittle. The moment he saw me, that smile faltered, but he quickly straightened, greeting us as though nothing had happened. We took our seats, Sophie sliding in beside me, and the conversation began. It was strained, forced, with Nathan leading the way. He spoke of new contracts and clients, his voice carrying a confidence that felt rehearsed. I listened quietly, letting him build his facade, and when he paused to take a sip of water, I set my fork down gently. "Interesting," I said, my voice even. "Because from what I've heard, most of your investors pulled out after Ella." The table fell silent, the sound of utensils against plates halting midair. Robert's brow furrowed as he turned to his son. "What is she talking about?" he asked sharply. Nathan shot me a glare, his jaw tight. "Claire, this isn't the time." I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder I had prepared days earlier. Slowly, I spread the contents across the table: receipts from dinners, hotel bookings, credit card charges for jewelry he never gave me, and the champagne bill from our anniversary reservation. The room filled with gasps, Megan's hand flying to her mouth, Daniel muttering under his breath. Nathan reached across the table, desperate to gather the papers, but I pressed my hand down firmly. "Don't," I said. "You've lied enough. These are your choices, your charges. You didn't just betray me, you used my inheritance to fund it all." Robert's face turned red as he pushed his chair back slightly. "Is this true?" he demanded. Nathan opened his mouth, but before he could spin an excuse, I cut in. "He canceled our anniversary dinner to sit with Brooke at Ella, at our table. Half the city saw it, and most of them filmed it." Daniel pulled out his phone, scrolling quickly, and shook his head. "It's online," he murmured. "Over 10,000 views." Nathan's composure cracked. "It's not what it looks like," he stammered. I leaned forward, my voice steady. "For once, stop insulting everyone's intelligence. You humiliated me in public. You lied to your daughter. And now you sit here pretending to be the victim." Elaine looked down, her face pale, while Robert's jaw tightened in shame. Daniel leaned across the table, his voice low but firm. "You've dragged this family's name through the mud, Nathan. Do you think anyone will trust you with their business now?" Nathan's shoulders slumped, his hands trembling slightly as he tried to hold on to the image of control. And then, as though timed by fate, the front door opened. Brooke stepped inside, her face paling as the conversation stopped cold. She must have thought she would find an ally in Nathan, but instead, she found a room thick with judgment. Her voice wavered. "I didn't know," she started, but I shook my head. "Save it. You knew exactly what you were walking into." You're not just the other woman. You're the punchline to his biggest lie. The room buzzed with whispers, and Megan let out a quiet laugh of disbelief. Brooke turned to Nathan, panic rising in her voice. You told me this was handled. Nathan buried his face in his hands, but I didn't wait for his reply. I gathered the papers back into the folder, tucked it under my arm, and looked around the table. I'm not here for sympathy, I said. I'm here to make one thing clear. This man built his life on my sacrifices and tore it down with his choices. I will not go down with him. I stood, taking Sophie's hand, and together we walked toward the door. The silence behind us was heavy, broken only by Robert's voice, deep and final. You've disgraced yourself, son. Don't expect this family to clean up your mess. I felt Sophie's grip tighten, her small steps matching mine as we left the room. In the car, she sat quietly for a moment before speaking. Mom, she said softly, are we going to be okay? I turned to her, brushing her hair back, and answered without hesitation. Yes, sweetheart, we're going to be better than okay. Her eyes held mine, steady and trusting, and in that moment, I knew I was no longer just surviving, I was reclaiming our lives. As we drove away, the lights of the Matthews house fading in the rearview mirror, I felt the weight of years lifting. Nathan had lost more than his wife that night. He had lost his family's trust, his dignity, and the last of the illusions he clung to. I didn't know how he would spin the story next, but I knew this, the truth was no longer hidden. And the truth had only just begun to unravel his world. 3 days after the dinner at his parents' house, Nathan appeared on a local gossip page standing in front of his office with a reporter's microphone in his face. His shirt was pressed, his smile calculated, but I knew the man beneath it was unraveling. There are 2 sides to every marriage, he said, his voice carrying that polished tone he used in sales meetings. Claire has her struggles. She can be emotional. I just hope people won't believe everything they see online. Watching it from my kitchen table, I almost laughed. Emotional. That was the word he chose, hoping to paint me as unstable, while the whole city had already seen the truth for themselves. The video spread quickly, gathering comments that cut through his performance like knives. This guy cheats on his wife in public and calls her emotional. Another wrote, she underreacted if you ask me. Memes began to circulate, screenshots of him at Ella paired with sarcastic captions. One clip of me walking out roses tossed to the floor was edited with drum beats and had tens of thousands of likes. Nathan had always thrived on reputation, on the admiration of peers and clients. Now his name wasn't spoken with respect, but with laughter. I didn't need to push hard. With my lawyer's advice, I released carefully chosen receipts to a few trusted hands. Screenshots of texts between him and Brooke, charges for jewelry he claimed he bought for me, hotel bookings listed as business trips. A local blogger picked it up, weaving it into a story that framed Nathan as Sacramento's newest cautionary tale. By nightfall, the article had spread beyond our circle of friends. People who had never met us now recognized his name, and not for the work he had once been proud of. Nathan's attempt at damage control grew desperate. He posted a long rant on Facebook, calling me vindictive, accusing me of weaponizing personal struggles. Within hours, screenshots of his post were everywhere, accompanied by mocking replies. One person wrote, "My guy, you weaponized your anniversary reservation." The comments piled up until he deleted the post, but the damage was already done. The internet had carved him into a caricature, and once that happens, there's no putting the mask back on. Meanwhile, Brooke vanished. Her once lively social media went private, her posts scrubbed clean. Word reached me that she had left her job at the marketing firm after coworkers couldn't resist whispering about Ella whenever she walked into a room. The fantasy she thought she had stepped into with Nathan collapsed quickly, leaving her with nothing but the debris of his lies. One evening, as I was folding laundry, my phone rang. It was Nathan. His voice tired, the edges frayed. "Claire, you have to stop this," he pleaded. "I can't go anywhere without people staring. I can't open my phone without being tagged in some joke. You've made your point." I let the silence stretch before I answered. "No, Nathan. I'm just getting started. You humiliated me in public. Now you know what real humiliation feels like." I hung up, my heart racing, not with fear, but with a sense of justice, long overdue. The next morning, his face appeared on the local news. The anchor's voice was measured as she spoke. Sacramento businessman Nathan Matthews faces growing backlash after a viral video showed his wife confronting him at Ella Dining Room on their anniversary. The hashtag #TeamClaire has trended for 3 days. They cut to footage of him outside his office again, trying to smile while reporters pressed for answers. I sipped my coffee slowly, letting the moment sink in. For years, I had lived in his shadow, supporting him quietly while he soaked up attention. Now the spotlight was mine, and it was burning him alive. The fallout reached his business quickly. A major client pulled out of a contract citing reputation concerns. Anonymous callers flooded his office phone with prank messages. Yelp reviews appeared overnight, one reading, "Builds houses, as well as he builds excuses for cheating." It gathered dozens of upvotes, cementing his reputation in ways no apology could undo. Friends continued to check in with me, their messages filled with support. Julia came over with a bottle of wine one evening, shaking her head as she scrolled through the latest memes on her phone. "He always thought he was untouchable," she said. "Now he's just a punchline." I smiled faintly, knowing she was right. I hadn't asked for this spotlight, but I wouldn't turn away from it either. Every time someone laughed at him, the power he once held over me slipped further away. At Sophie's school, one of the other moms stopped me in the parking lot, her voice low but kind. "Good for you, Claire. Don't let him walk all over you." Her words lingered as I buckled Sophie into the car, a reminder that even strangers could see the strength I had finally chosen to claim. Sophie watched me carefully, her little brow furrowed, but she didn't ask questions. Later that night, as I tucked her into bed, she whispered, "I don't like Aunt Brooke. She smiles too much." I hugged her tightly, holding back tears. She deserved better than a father who taught her that lies were normal. Each day brought new ripples. Nathan's investors drifted away. His employees began to leave, and even his own family distanced themselves. Robert called me one evening, his voice heavy with disappointment. "Do what you need to do for Sophie," he said. "Nathan has made his bed." I could hear the finality in his tone, and I knew Nathan had lost more than just me. He had lost the foundation of trust his family once gave him. Through it all, I kept my focus. This wasn't about vengeance for vengeance's sake. It was about showing Sophie that actions have consequences, that betrayal has a cost. Nathan had chosen his path when he sat at that table with Brooke. I was simply making sure the world saw the truth of where it led him. By the end of that week, his name was no longer attached to contracts or projects. It was attached to a scandal that followed him everywhere. And as much as he tried to claw back control, he couldn't. The story was out, and the story wasn't his anymore. By the time the first court date arrived, Nathan's polished exterior was already cracking. He walked into the courthouse in a tailored suit, shoulders back, as though he could still charm his way through. But the sheen had dulled. I sat at our attorney's table, my hands folded neatly, Sophie's school photo tucked inside my bag for courage. Claire Donovan stood beside me, her voice low and steady, as she whispered, "We've got everything we need." Her confidence was like armor, and I clung to it as the hearing began. Nathan's lawyer started predictably trying to paint me as bitter and vindictive, a woman using scandal to ruin a man's career. I felt the judge's gaze settle on me, as if measuring whether there was truth to the claim. When Claire rose, she didn't waste words. She laid out the numbers, clearly receipts, highlighted bank transfers, traced hotel stays, documented. Mrs. Matthews provided the financial foundation for this marriage, she said firmly. Mr. Matthews exploited her resources, her trust, and her inheritance to finance an affair. We're not seeking vengeance, we're seeking fairness. Nathan shifted in his chair, his jaw tight as Claire spoke. His lawyer tried to object, but the judge allowed the evidence. Every page of proof told a story Nathan couldn't refute, and I watched his face pale as the weight of it sank in. When the conversation turned to custody, my chest tightened. Nathan insisted he was a good father, that despite his mistakes, he deserved equal time with Sophie. Claire opened a folder and slid it across the table to the judge. Inside were records of his late-night outings, credit card charges from weekends when he was supposed to be home, screenshots of messages exchanged with Brooke while Sophie slept under our roof. I steadied my voice as I spoke for the first time. I want my daughter to have a father, I said carefully. But I won't let her grow up thinking this is normal. She deserves stability, and right now, I am the only one who can give it. The judge listened, his expression unreadable, then finally nodded. Primary custody granted to me, with supervised visits for Nathan, until he could demonstrate responsible behavior. The words echoed through the courtroom like a gavel striking twice. Nathan slumped back the fight, leaving his shoulders. I kept my face calm, but inside relief surged like a tide. Outside of court, the fallout continued. Nathan's business had already been bleeding. Now the cracks widened. Contracts collapsed, investors vanished, and his employees, most of whom had quietly known more than they admitted, resigned one by one. A few even reached out to me privately, apologizing for the silence. We saw things, one message read. We didn't realize how deep it went. We're sorry. At home, Sophie adjusted slowly. She asked fewer questions about her father, but when she returned from her supervised visits, she came home quiet, thoughtful. One evening, she sat at the kitchen table, chin resting on her hand, and said softly, I don't think Daddy knows how to be happy. Her words cut deeper than any of Nathan's betrayals, because they came from a child's clear-eyed wisdom. I hugged her close, promising that together we would find our own happiness, piece by piece. Weeks later, the final division of assets was decided. Claire pressed hard, and the court agreed. The house came to me along with a majority share in what remained of Nathan's company and restitution from his portion to repay my inheritance. He was left with little more than debts, his old truck, and the clothes on his back. When the gavel fell for the last time, Nathan sagged in his chair, his head bowed, while I gathered my papers and walked out with Sophie's hand in mine. Reporters called questions, but I only paused long enough to say, I feel free. The image of Nathan sitting on the curb outside his former office reached me days later through a photo a friend sent. Boxes stacked beside him, head in his hands, the man who once strutted into restaurants now looked small, diminished, and defeated. I stared at the photo for a long time, not with triumph, but with a strange, quiet peace. He had gambled my loyalty against his ego, and he had lost. Our final confrontation came unexpectedly in the empty echo of the house we once called home. Movers had cleared most of it, leaving bare walls and a single couch too old to bother hauling. Nathan showed up uninvited, his shoulders slumped, his face drawn and unshaven. For the first time in years, he looked human, though pitifully so. I've lost everything, he said, his voice rough. The business is gone. Investors cut me off. Brooke's long gone. My dad won't even return my calls. Half the time, I'm sleeping in my truck. His eyes watered, his voice breaking. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm begging you. Please, can we find some way back for Sophie for us? I stood against the wall, arms crossed, letting the silence stretch. For us, I repeated softly. You only came back because you hit rock bottom. You didn't care about us when you spent my inheritance on hotel rooms. You didn't care when you put Brooke in my seat at Ella. Don't pretend this is about Sophie. This is about you." He flinched, but still pressed on. "I was stupid. I let my ego get the best of me. But I can change Claire. I swear I can change. We can rebuild." His words were desperate, almost frantic. I shook my head slowly. "You don't get it, Nathan. You burned the bridge between us. You wanted applause more than loyalty. And now you want me to pretend the ashes are still a home. That isn't love. That's survival. And I've learned to do better without you." His eyes brimmed with tears, and for a moment I thought he might collapse onto the old couch. Instead, he just stood there, hollow and trembling. I picked up my keys from the counter, walked past him, and paused at the door. "You wanted to see me? Fine, this is the last time. Get used to it." As I stepped outside, the evening air felt cool and new, the sky painted in pink and gold streaks. My car was packed, Sophie's bag ready in the back seat. Through the window, I saw Nathan still standing in the doorway, small and broken. For years, I had been the one left waiting, wondering when he would come home. Not anymore. This time, I was the one leaving, and I wasn't looking back. A year later, I almost didn't recognize the woman in the mirror. The dark circles that once clung to my eyes had faded, replaced by a light I thought I'd lost. My shoulders no longer carried the weight of secrets, and my reflection looked like someone who had survived the storm and learned how to stand tall again. Sophie and I settled into a smaller house on the east side of Sacramento. Nothing grand, but full of sunlight. She decorated her own room with poster string lights and stacks of books, and every time I heard her laugh, drifting down the hall, I knew we had made the right choice. Our happiness wasn't complicated. It was Saturday morning pancakes, road trips with the windows rolled down, and movie nights that ended with both of us asleep on the couch. The absence of tension was its own kind of luxury. I returned to real estate with fresh determination, and something remarkable happened. Clients who had followed our story reached out choosing to work with me because they admired my resilience. What Nathan saw as my humiliation became my momentum. I built my reputation not as someone's wife, but as Claire Matthews, a woman capable of holding her own ground. Success came not from sacrifice this time, but from finally believing in myself. Nathan's name, meanwhile, drifted into the background. He no longer walked with that familiar swagger, and the last I heard, he was renting a single room from an old friend scraping by with odd jobs. He called a few times, always with the same desperate tone, but I stopped answering. His voice belonged to a chapter that had ended. The man who once dictated the rhythm of my life was now only an echo fading into irrelevance. Sophie adjusted better than I could have dreamed. She asked about her father less and less, and when she did see him during supervised visits, she came home quiet, thoughtful. One evening, she looked at me and said, "Mom, I don't think Daddy knows how to be happy." Out of the mouths of children, the truth often comes simply. I hugged her and told her that was why we had to make our own happiness, and every single day, that's what we did. Sometimes, I drive past Ella the restaurant where it all broke open. For a long time, I thought the memory of that night would haunt me, the sting of betrayal, the sound of my hand striking his face, the walk into the night air with my pride in shreds. Instead, it became the turning point. It was the moment I stopped shrinking myself for someone else's comfort, the night I chose to believe my worth was not negotiable. If betrayal taught me anything, it was this: people will show you who they are when they think you'll stay no matter what. The real power comes when you finally prove them wrong. Nathan gambled my silence against his ego, but I chose to speak, and in doing so, I reclaimed my dignity. Justice didn't arrive with noise or spectacle. It came quietly, in freedom, in peace, in a life lived honestly with my daughter by my side. So now, when I think back on those 12 years, I don't carry bitterness. I carry gratitude, not for the pain, but for the strength it forced me to discover. Freedom, I learned, is the sweetest kind of justice, and once you taste it, you never go back. Before we close, I'd love to know what part of this journey spoke most deeply to you. Share your thoughts in the comments, and if stories of resilience and truth bring you comfort, you're always welcome to stay connected here.